the death of Brian Terry? No, none of us did. And this was a horrible incident that we're dealing with a lot of consequences of over time because we want to make sure it never happens again. We've heard loud and clear from you. You want to make sure this never happens again, and I appreciate that. What I want to do is talk briefly about ATF and the structure there. Obviously, this was an acting director. You have to have concerns, have extra there, to have extra attention to it in the management based on an acting director and the transitions and all that's happened with ATF on it. The structure with the FBI, and if they're going to go for an undercover operation, the field office proposal, it goes through the supervisor in charge, it goes to headquarters, it goes through legal. Then legal has got to determine, is this entrapment, is this fully within the bounds of that? U.S. attorney may get involved in it at some point, and then it goes up to headquarters if it involves a certain amount of money and a length of time and such. So it has a very lengthy process getting all the way up to the Department of Justice on that. Is that a similar process to what ATF also does to be able to approve an operation like this undercover?
I'm not sure that it is as robust as what you have just described with regard to the FBI, but it is certainly.
But that is consistent with the FBI process. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
Is that the right process for FBI that they go through?
I think the FBI process is a good one.
Okay, that's great. And
I think that what we need to do is have, not only with regard to ATF, but all the other investigative agencies within the Justice Department, make sure that we have similar procedures in place. It's one of the things that I've talked about with Todd Jones, the acting director, who's in the process of making changes at ATF.
Yeah, because that is the concern, obviously, to put in a system and structure to make sure this never, ever happens again. It's one thing to talk about it after the fact. It's another thing to try to fix it. And so it doesn't become such a bureaucratic maze that nothing happens, but it also makes sure there are some checks and balances, that we're not doing entrapment, that someone else is checking it, that it is getting up to your office. If it wasn't getting to your office of something like this before, let's try to make sure it does in the future days, get up to DOJ. So that is something in process. What is the time frame on that for a decision and a shift on that that's occurring?
You know, I mean, I would hope that this is something that we can do over a matter of a relatively short number of months. I think to do this right, we need to have buy-in from people who are at ATF headquarters, people who are in the field, so they have an ability to express their views, and so that they will accept these are things that are probably going to be changes in the way in which they have operated. So I think we're talking about a matter of months before we have those kinds of things in place. Again, Todd has already made really significant changes. He's working real hard at this, but I think the concern that you have expressed is one that I agree with. We should make sure that we have processes in place to minimize the possibility that what we are talking about today, and legitimately talking about today, ever happens again.
Right. The last thing I want to say to the Terry family at some point is this occurred and nothing's happened to make sure it never occurs again. That there's some way to be able to say this is never going to occur again as long as it's on any of our watch on it. Let me make a quick side statement that I'm going to yield back to the Chairman as well. This is not something I expect you to answer on it. It's a comment that I want to be able to make. It is off topic on it, so I'm going to tell you that. Yesterday, this committee had a hearing deal with the constitutional issues and the repercussions of the President's appointments to the NLRB and CFPB in January. Obviously, your department is very involved in that and in the constitutional statement. In 2010, Deputy Solicitor General Neil Catel was before the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice Roberts asked him specifically, can the NLRB question be resolved with a recess appointment? Neil Catel at that time said no.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like there's another violation of your rule coming up.
The gentlelady is out of order.
I already prefaced it by saying I do not anticipate this. I'm making a statement about it. I do not expect the Attorney General to respond to this. So Neil Catel made this statement to the Supreme Court saying that no, a recess appointment could not be done if it's less than 3 days. So there was an opinion by him on that before the Supreme Court dealing specifically with NLRB. 2 years later, Justice came back out and came out with a statement saying, no, that is legal. So there was a transition. Mr. Chairman, what I would hope for at some point is to be able to have some conversation to say what changed between 2010 and 2012 in justice, that at one point they considered it not legal, and 2 years later considered it legal and appropriate at that point. So obviously I'm not expecting you, that's not in your preparation on that, but that is something we just dealt with as a committee yesterday, and I would hope in some future day we would deal with.
Well, if I could just...
I thank the gentleman. There's no question there. Are you yielding to me?
I do yield back.
And